welcome to Time to Talk Science and Medicine, a new podcast designed to highlight translational researchers from Queen's University, Kingston, Ontario. The main goal of these podcasts will be to focus on the researcher, find out where they've come from, what motivates them, and how their research will change the world. We also try to find out a little bit about the person behind the dangerous idea, which makes their research world-class. My name is Dr. Charlie Hindmarch, and I'm a genomics researcher and faculty member of Queen's University, Kingston, Ontario.
And my name is Stephen Archer. I'm a cardiologist, clinician scientist, and I'm the scientific director of TIME, the Translational Institute of Medicine here at Queen's. And today I'm delighted to welcome my friend and colleague, Dr. Annette Hay, who is many things. I've got a list here in front of me so I don't forget anything. Most importantly, from when I used to be the head of medicine, she's the division head of hematology and the chair of that division, which is an extremely important administrative role and leadership role. But she's also a senior investigator in the Canadian Cancer Trials Group, and she's the chair of holds the CMO chair in research and innovation, and is a hematologist and clinician scientist. And Dr. Hay has been extremely successful recently in obtaining a large amount of research funding, which Dr. Hindmarch will tell you about, but is now a leader nationally in cell-based therapies.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Hay is leading an initiative that brings made-in-Canada cancer treatments here. She's been recognised with government funding so that she can establish and operationalise the manufacture of something called CAR T cells, which promise to be another valuable treatment for cancer therapeutics.
I think that Dr. Hindmarch and I are about to get an education in cell-based therapies. But before we do that, Dr. Hay, tell us your backstory, because you have that lovely lilting accent, and I can tell you're not from downtown Kingston originally. So tell us how you became a clinician scientist and what are your roots?
Well, thank you very much for having me here. I'm delighted to chat with you. The origin story: I was born in Portadown, County Armagh, Northern Ireland. My dad was a preacher, my mum was a housewife, and there are many tributaries have led to where I am now. I moved to Scotland to do my medical training and residency. That's where I met my husband, had my kids. I also spent time in Brazil, which was really great to just see other cultures and learn other things, meet other people. And I came to Canada in 2011 for a research fellowship with the Canadian Cancer Trials Group, and you haven't managed to get rid of me yet. I was delighted to become a Canadian citizen in 2023. And in terms of how I ended up becoming a clinician scientist and even a doctor in the first place, it's sometimes only looking back that you realise the influences that the past had on you. And one of my good high school friends in school, Kerry Ann, developed leukemia towards the end of our high school. She sat her math A-level exams from her bone marrow transplant room and got better grades than me. And sadly, she died. Now, through seeing all of that, I became aware of hematology, of the disease, of the impact. So that didn't guide me towards medicine and hematology directly, but certainly as I saw new opportunities and new research evolving, it made sense.
And did you see yourself did you have any awareness of the medical profession when you were a kid other than this encounter with your friend, or did you sort of envision yourself being a physician, or how did you decide to go the medical route?
Oh, I was the typical kid. I wanted to be absolutely everything, from prime minister to an astronaut, to a mountaineer, to a trapeze artist in the circus, to a journalist. And medicine, it appealed to me in the end because I think most of us have gone into it partly through a desire to help people. And also I knew if I went to university, I was going to build up debt. And there was an attractiveness to knowing there was a high likelihood of getting a job at the end that would pay back student debts.
Well, it's kind of a shame. We do need more trapeze artists. So I'm really kind of sorry that you passed on that, but I guess as a second choice, hematology is not
It's
bad.
more of a bucket list than I think these are things you have to tick off from now
over
on.
Yet.
No, exactly.
Glad you stayed away from Prime Minister. That's the thing.
So, wow, I mean, that's an interesting backstory. Tell me more about your time in Brazil and brought you to Brazil, and what kind of experiences that brought to your career.
So it's now a long time ago, and I'm looking forward to getting back again, but I've been in Brazil on 4 occasions. The first was at the Earth Summit in 1992, where I was voted by the United Nations Association to go and represent British youth. I got to interview the current Prime Minister at that time, John Major. Sorry, John Major.
He's no trapezer.
He's fine, no.
So that sowed the seed. That was 3 weeks, mostly in Rio de Janeiro, but we also traveled to the Pantanal area. Then I went back actually with the church up to Salvador in the north, where we were in the shantytown Peri, and it was another great experience. Then I went back for 7 months between high school and university, where I was in the south in Londrina, Paraná, living with a wonderful family and teaching English. And then my last time back was 2000, where I was in Rio de Janeiro doing a 2-month medical elective at the Hospital Pedro Ernesto. And it's about time I returned.
So from the backstory of that you've told us, which is very interesting, let's get to your dangerous idea. And by dangerous idea, we mean some research idea or concept that you have that, if it's true, would disrupt how we currently do business in medicine, or as the kids say, big if true. So what's your dangerous idea?
The dangerous idea, disrupting an already disruptive technology. So I'm going to start out by telling you where we're at right now. You mentioned CAR T cell therapy in the introduction. There's not going to be a test on what it stands for, but for those who are interested, it stands for chimeric antigen receptor T cell therapy. Now, it sounds like science fiction, but it is total science fact. And it's happening right now, and including people in Kingston have had this special sort of cancer treatment. And for some of them, it has been akin to a miracle, where their cancer has gone into remission where nothing else worked, including chemotherapy or bone marrow transplant. Now, what it actually does is it takes the person's own immune blood cells. They're flown down to the United States, California, New Jersey, where these T lymphocyte blood cells are engineered to make them recognize the person's cancer. And then that engineered bag of multiplied cells is flown back to their own hospital, where it's infused into their body. Now, right now, the current status in Kingston, since that's where we're sitting, is that there's a number of patients here, maybe about 25, who have been treated with CAR T cell therapy. Initially, they had to fly down to the United States to actually be treated there. Now it's available in several Canadian centres, including Ottawa and Toronto, where patients from our area currently go. And one of the exciting things is we have just got senior hospital leadership approval to become an established CAR T cell therapy treating centre here. And that's going to take a bit of work, but we're on it.
Congratulations. And congratulations to KGH, Kingston Health Sciences Center, because that's every time you take on one of these new technologies, as a doctor, it's woohoo, but as a hospital, I think they look at the way they're funded in the province and think, how are we going to afford this life-saving program?
And that's a really good point, and I should make more shout-outs there, because often the doctors get the credit, but there is a huge orchestra of people, both behind the scenes and at the forefront, who actually do the work to make it work. And that includes managers, nurses, many.
So Stephen obviously mentioned finances and the way that hospitals kind of funded it. Is it currently expensive to send blood cells down to California and have them engineered and sent back?
Exorbitantly expensive. So the cost is roughly $500,000 for one bag of CAR T cells. And that is not taking into account all the other costs, such as collecting the cells, giving the treatment before and after, being in hospital to keep an eye out for side effects and manage those as they arise.
So it's critically important that we bring this kind of technology so that we can make these therapies right here in Canada.
Nice segue. Yes, it is. And that is the additional disruption. And I should also say that everything I do is part of a wonderful team. And I am working with a wonderful team of researchers in Kingston, Queens, across Ontario and Canada to make this happen. And the disruptive technology we are working on collaboratively is to actually do all of this in Canada, because we can. We have got people in Canada who are inventing new types of cell therapies that may be even better than the existing ones. We've got established facilities in Canada where all aspects of the manufacturing of the cell therapy can be done. And we've got the expertise to run the clinical trials. So it's just bringing all of that together, expanding and enhancing the infrastructure so we can bring it back to Canada, create job opportunities here, but also for patients. We may well be able to do it faster for the environment, if you can minimize the number of flights between countries, that's helpful. So there are so many potential benefits, economic, health, and more.
It's so nice to actually hear about a Made in Canada story, because I think there are many lessons we learned from the COVID-19 pandemic, but one of them was certainly if you're relying on other countries, no matter how allied they are with you for your masks or your vaccine, you're second or third or fourth in line. And I think for Canadians, it's not only, I'm sure, an industry that would be probably profitable, and it's great for the patients themselves, but just as a national sort of achievement to be able to create this network. And how did you, you'll tell us more about this, but when you get to your research segment, but we'll be interested to know how you managed to do what many big industries have not done, which is try to make something in Canada. So we'll put that thought bubble in your head for just down the road in this podcast.
Well, I was actually going to ask one follow-up question, because I'm fascinated about this being a kind of a made in Canada brand new therapy. But, the existing therapy is chemotherapy, right? So presumably CAR T cells is an advantage over the conventional therapies. How so?
Right now, I believe all cancer therapies are complementary to each other. I do not see that we're ready to throw any of them out. Because for some people and some conditions, chemotherapy is brilliant. And for example, in aggressive lymphomas or Hodgkin lymphoma, there's often over a 90% cure rate in some subtypes with chemotherapy for short-term treatment. So it's not gone. There's also radiation therapy, which can be very helpful if you have a lesion, let's say, in one area. So CAR T-cell therapy right now is being used where existing treatments haven't worked. Now, we are doing research, and it's possible CAR T-cell therapy may be used earlier and earlier, but that is to be determined.
That $500,000 bag of cells, you don't have to do that repeatedly, right? That's a one-time, hopefully one-and-done therapy?
Right now, it's a one-time, one-and-done therapy. Again, research is ongoing. Perhaps you might follow up with another or complement it with another therapy. Now, in terms of how well it works, for people with lymphoma, let's say, while we haven't been using this technology for very long, it's a small number of years, but roughly 40% of people appear to have a really good sustained remission, which for some translates to a cure. So around 40% long-term success where other treatments have failed.
Yeah, and cure is a big word in cancer because there's remission, which means it's gone for now, but it might come back. And then there's cure, which I think is what most lay people, including me, would think of when they are told they're in remission. They hope they're cured, but remission doesn't always mean cure. It's a temporary state, I guess.
We tend to be very cautious. I'm a very hopeful person, and I like to convey hope, but I also don't want to convey false hope, because for some people it's a cure. For some, it's not, and that's one of its limitations, because it doesn't work for everybody. And even when it does, it doesn't always last long-term for everybody. And there are many, many diseases where there isn't a cell therapy available right now. So those are three of the reasons that we're motivated to build on the fantastic foundation in place after decades of work to make it even better.
You've made a really, really nice job of very clearly explaining CAR T cells to us. And of course, we have qualifications in science, and we've read the papers and we've read the literature. Can I just push you to just break it down even more and just bring it down to say, I'm a high school student. What do I need to know about CAR T cells and their place in the kind of arsenal of weapons that you have for treating cancer?
I know a bunch of high school students. I have two of my own, and I think many of them are smarter than us.
At least the people in this room. Right?
So for a high school student, I know like CRISPR-Cas9 is sometimes on the learning agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. It's on my son's curriculum. Yeah.
Yeah. So the things to know, it is a highly personalized form of treatment for cancer right now, taking the body's own immune blood cells and re-educating them to do their job and fight cancer. And for high school students, I'm always conscious that the jobs they may end up doing are often the jobs that don't even exist yet. And this is such a growing field. It's somewhere where I actually think their new approaches and ingenuity could be really helpful. Because for sure, within science, you can make advances in how you specifically engineer those cells. Engineering is another big piece, and that's part of the research we're doing, is manufacturing locally and more quickly in collaboration with engineering. Then there's the bioethics about access, there's the logistics, there's the humanity of it. So there are so many components that in your career you can contribute to this type of cell therapy research or delivery and more.
Yeah, it is very cool, and it is interesting. I mean, this will be a young person's game, and so some high school student out there will have the next big idea, I'm sure. So speaking of big ideas, so you tell us more now about your latest research. I was going to say discovery, but probably more appropriate in your case, it's like building a national program. So who's funding this? How did it happen? Did someone come and give you a bag of money, or what's the story about what you're doing and how you're doing it?
It has evolved with hard work and collaboration over many years. Because in science, as in many other areas, you invest a lot before you start to reap the rewards. So part of what made this possible is it became clear to me, firstly, the patient need. I was looking after patients when I was seeing CAR T-cell therapy emerging, thinking, this might help them, but I couldn't access it quickly enough for them at that point. So that motivated me to understand it, to get into it, to see what was possible. And then as I got talking to experts across the country working in various areas of cell therapy, from discovery and invention to manufacturing, to doing the laboratory studies and even the health policy, the economics, the quality of life, it became clear to me there was so much expertise in Canada, but there was a perception that we were competing with each other. So it was wonderful that we got everybody together in one room to map out, this is what I can do, this is where I can fit in a national translational cell therapy research platform. And from that, we established the community that wasn't taking over from any one organization or group, but was leveraging it multiple fold. And we submitted a multi-center Canada Foundation for Innovation infrastructure grant in 2019.
That's CFI.
CFI.
That's our friend.
The co-principal investigators on that was me, and it was Queen's University were the lead institution, and Dr. Jonathan Bramson at McMaster University, but it included 6 institutions in total, including Calgary, Montreal, Ottawa, and Canadian Blood Services. And with that, we secured infrastructure to expand the capacity for translational cell therapy research. And then once you've got the infrastructure, which we're still working on getting all those pieces in place, it's work in progress, going well, then you need the research funding. So there has been a prolonged period of applying for grants, rejections, and finally successes, hard-earned. And the study that I'm excited about right now is a new cell therapy trial we're launching in multiple myeloma, which is a type of blood cancer. And this is completely made in Canada. So the invention of the new type of cell therapy called T-cell antigen coupler comes from Jonathan Bramson at McMaster University. The manufacturing of the personalized treatment for every patient will be done in Victoria, Ottawa, and Montreal for each of the different components to make it. The clinical trial will be run by the Canadian Cancer Trials Group at Queen's University. The laboratory studies that accompany it will be done at Kingston Health Sciences Centre and at McMaster University. Graham Quest is one of the collaborators. And the centres opening the trial are actually the same ones as who were the main participants in the Accelerate Canada CFI grant. But of course, the community is much wider than that. So right now we're doing all the pre-work and should be enrolling the first patient in early 2025.
Well, fingers crossed, that's good. And it is interesting for people that don't do the science grant business. CFI is sort of the toy store where we get the equipment, and then you had to go to CIHR, I assume, Canadian Institute of Health Research, to actually get the operational dollars to actually do the science. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
CIHR and more.
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, that is a challenge. So, okay, well, that's very exciting.
I think one of the most interesting things that have come out of the conversation this morning is the number of people that you're acknowledging at every step. This truly is a multidisciplinary national-wide scheme that involves clinicians, scientists, researchers, administrators, managers, and leaders.
Absolutely. And I could say so many more names. It takes an army.
It takes an army. And it's really good to hear not only the acknowledgement, but actually how it's a lot of people that are working for the good of this. It's fantastic.
And I think the spin-off, first and foremost, you identified patient need, and each of the people we've talked to on the podcast, each of the docs that have been researchers have identified some patient need. Dr. Fleming told us that women need to know and understand more about the alcohol they consume for the safety of their liver. You saw a problem for people with blood cancers and jumped into it. But there are sort of commercial spin-offs of this. Like, I think my understanding of your research is your cells are grown in something called the cocoon. Is that right? Or is that what's the role of, I've heard this intriguing cocoon name in your research.
That is certainly one approach that we are using.
Mm-hmm.
So the Lonza cocoon is a beautiful futuristic type box in which it's a closed system where CAR T cells can be manufactured. Now, it can do more than that, but that is the purpose for which we will be using it. And since we're sitting in Kingston, a really cool fact is this cocoon was actually invented just down the road at the Octane facility in Dalton Avenue. So yet another Canadian innovation that we are using in this myeloma cell therapy clinical trial. Now, I should be fair, there are other industry products that can be used, such as the Miltenyi Prodigy, but we are excited right now to have partners which help complement this whole Made in Canada theme, and they have a really good product.
Yeah, and that may get back to what we tell high school students about this is like, yes, sort of like Obama, yes, we can do these things here in our own country.
So we've obviously discussed all these wonderful things that you've done in your career and this terrific system that you're operationalizing. I just want to slow it down and just talk about bumps in the road, because every scientist and every researcher has a bump in the road that they can call on to remind them how fortunate they are when it's going well. What was your bump in the road?
I love the way you imply there may have been only one. The road is a rocky mountain path. There have been many. I don't think anything comes easy to anybody, and I'm certainly no stranger to that. There certainly have been lots of rejections in terms of grant applications, things that may or may not be ranked highly but don't get funded. And actually, I was very close. The CIHR grant that we submitted to fund this myeloma trial that ultimately was ranked first in the whole panel, it was going to be my last attempt. If that hadn't worked, I don't think I had it in me to submit again. So that would be a series of bumps in the road. Then thinking about funding, we got a very generous grant from CIHR of $3 million to do this cell therapy research. But that comes with a 25% cut that is automatically applied to everything at this time. $1 million to actually complete the research we need to do. That's taking a lot of ongoing work to fill that gap. And it takes a personal toll. Writing these grants, especially the CFI, which I was doing the end of 2019, the start of 2020, while maintaining a busy clinical practice, a lot of stuff going on, other research to maintain. I was pretty exhausted, running on 4 hours sleep a night for an unhealthy extended period of time. And then we submitted the last one, the Ontario Research Fund, in February 2020. I thought, great, I can relax for a minute. And then the pandemic hit in March 2020, and we ramped up again to address that. So I think there's always challenges. Right now, I'm listening to Arnold Schwarzenegger, Be Useful audiobook, which is really cool, but I disagree with him on one point. He says rest is for babies or retirees. I would say every now and again, you need a rest. After you've pushed yourself really hard to meet a goal or a deadline, you need to sit back and give yourself some space to regenerate and recuperate before you go in for the next marathon.
And possibly a giant glass of champagne to celebrate the first success, because as you say, it's a long journey, but so each step needs to be celebrated. And I think too often as clinician scientists, we take the cash from one grant and move on to the next challenge, but you need to stop and realize what a milestone it is that you've sort of migrated here from Ireland and like become a national leader in Canada, which is quite an accomplishment. But we'll ask you, we'll get beyond the flattery and go to your crystal ball. So you've done a lot, and I know you're just launching this journey. It hasn't been fully realized yet. But how do you envision the future for CAR T cells if you were to, and we're not going to hold you liable for what you say, but what's the future of the cell-based therapy? Does it start and end with the treatment of blood cancers?
I foresee that CAR T cell therapy is just the beginning. And one of the analogies we use is the Model T Ford, where it was a tremendous innovation. But from then, we went on to trucks and Teslas and whatever's going to come next. CAR T cell therapy, I think, is the first step. There's going to be ongoing innovations and improvements in blood cancers. I also foresee it expanding to other cancers and to other non-malignant conditions. There is really exciting research ongoing in many areas, such as infection, with early promise in conditions such as HIV, in autoimmune diseases, such as rheumatologic diseases, in neurologic conditions, such as Parkinson's or ALS, and even within the theme of cell and gene therapy. There's innovations in gene therapy for sickle cell disease, hemophilia. I'm really excited that we have had the opportunity in blood cancers to pioneer this innovation and lay the foundation for it to go much further with diseases and with global reach to the people who really need it.
It's really interesting that you've used that analogy of the Model T, because, of course, that was such a disruptive technology. And actually, I think it was Henry Ford who said, if you ask the people what they want, they'll tell you they want a faster horse. And that really kind of cracks open the mindset of the disruptive innovator that you and your like obviously are with this research, is that you're bringing something which was never imagined before to change the way that we do things. And of course, we're now at Teslas and electronic cars and, the sort of fantastic inventions and discoveries like that. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Hay, for taking time to speak to us about your clinic and your research. But before we wrap this podcast up, we know that you're more than just your research. We know that you're more than your clinic and your patients. So we've got a few questions that we like to ask people just to kind of get to know you a little bit more. Don't be worried. It's going to be
maybe be a little bit
worried. But
I'm in my face right
I'm
now.
going to start with one that I know you disclose because you've heard other podcasts and you've thought of one already. So if what is your favorite cartoon character, or what cartoon character represents you the best and why?
Can we guess what she's going to say?
Oh, yeah. No.
Because we haven't talked about this. So I said this to Dr. James. Superwoman would be an obvious one. That's one guess.
Oh, I've got Penelope Pitstop.
Oh, I was thinking Paddington Bear.
Oh, very good.
Did not see that coming.
No, I did not see that coming.
Well, you see, Paddington Bear is small and kind and well-intentioned. He likes an adventure and he likes a good snack. Things don't always go according to plan, and there's a few hiccups, but they work out in the end. And importantly, Paddington Bear, when he arrived in a new country, he was welcomed by the Brown family and the community, and I have felt the same way in Canada. I've been welcomed and I've really appreciated that and become part of the community.
Well, as a fellow immigrant to Canada, and also I got my citizenship in 2023 also. I completely agree with you, although I don't have marmalade sandwiches in my bag, but I'm sure you're doing yours.
Well, it is interesting. And again, I think without getting too far off topic, I think one of the things that listeners may not realize is just what an economic engine the Department of Medicine is, because all these smart people like you coming here are going to bask in your reflected glory a little bit and say the Department of Medicine has hired you and hired Dr. Hindmarch, and you have then brought your own incredible activities to this community and made it a richer place. So for those of you that wonder what the Department of Medicine at Queen's University, currently led by my friend and colleague, Dr. Chris Smith, does, they hire smart people from around the world that make things better. But anyway, here's another question for you. So what type of music do you listen to? Do you have a favorite artist or favorite genre?
I like a lot of music, to which my husband sometimes rolls his eyes. So I really like musicals. I like movie soundtracks if I'm trying to work or study. The last concert we went to together was the Foo Fighters in Toronto.
Great.
It was fantastic. Yeah, I like all sorts of music. Every now and again, there'll be Irish folk playing, or jazz, or pop, or whatever comes to mind on the playlist.
Do you have a grant writing soundtrack that you listen to?
It varies. There's one of the playlists which is inspiring movie soundtracks. That's that one.
I listened to the Dixie Chicks Not Ready to Make Nice about 1,000 times while writing grants.
That might explain everything.
That could explain a lot. That's my problem.
Okay, so if you could talk to your 18-year-old self, what kind of advice would you offer to her?
Absolutely none.
Great answer. No, that's a great answer.
She wouldn't have taken it anyway.
Somehow I doubt that that's actually true. I know your daughters a little bit, and I'm going to round them up and see if that's really true. Mama's not providing large amounts of advice. I would highly doubt that, but that's a good answer.
Yeah, what's your favorite meal? And importantly, can you cook it?
My talent for eating food is bigger than my talent for creating food. Again, I like all sorts of foods. A happy meal would be lasagna. You can't go wrong with a lasagna. I thought you were just going to go with Happy Meal there. Comes with a toy. And when I cook, it's things like I can make a decent apple and parsnip soup, which is nice. At Christmas time, I sometimes like to make a plum pudding, which is always fun to set on fire. But more I eat than cook.
Sounds good. So just before we wrap up, is there one question that you wish we'd asked you?
No, I feel quite relieved you didn't ask me more.
Can you tell me what that question is?
That's the next podcast.
On behalf of Dr. Archer and myself, I'd like to thank you for taking time to get to know Dr. Hay, one of Queen's University's translational researchers, and finding out how her research will bring Canadian-made cancer therapies to life right here in Kingston. If you've enjoyed this episode and would like to know more about Queen's University Translational Medicine researchers, or to share this podcast with somebody else, you can search for Time to Talk Science and Medicine wherever you normally look for podcasts. Thank you.